My mother-in-law slapped me when I refused to give up what I'd prepared for my unborn child to my also pregnant sister-in-law. So I made them pay quietly. My name is Hannah, and at the time of this story I was 7 months pregnant with my first child. My sister Megan had always been the golden child in our family, the one who got everything handed to her, whose tears could move mountains, and who somehow always managed to make everyone else's problems disappear in favor of her own drama. Megan was 5 months pregnant with her third child, her first 2 children, a beautiful daughter named Lily who was already 5 years old and a son named Max, who was 3, were staying with their grandparents during the shower. You'd think having experience with 2 kids would make things easier, but Megan had a talent for making even the simplest situations feel like life or death emergencies. The baby shower was held at our mother's house, a beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch that Mom had spent months preparing for Megan's big day. Pink and gold decorations adorned every surface, and the dining room table groaned under the weight of an elaborate spread that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I arrived at the shower with my husband Jason, carrying a gift bag containing a beautiful handmade baby blanket I'd spent weeks crocheting. Despite being heavily pregnant and exhausted most of the time, I'd wanted to give Megan something special, something made with love. The moment we walked in, I could feel the eyes on me. Not the warm, welcoming gazes you'd expect at a family gathering, but something else entirely. Something that made my skin crawl and my protective instincts flare. Megan was holding court in the living room, surrounded by our aunts, cousins, and family friends. She looked radiant in a flowing maternity dress that probably cost more than my entire maternity wardrobe. When she saw me, her smile faltered for just a moment before she plastered it back on. "Hannah, you made it," she called out, though her tone suggested she might have preferred otherwise. The shower proceeded normally for the first hour. We played the typical games, cooed over tiny clothes, and watched Megan open gift after gift. I noticed that several people had given her practical items, bottles, diapers, a high-end stroller, and even a convertible crib that made everyone ooh and ah in appreciation. It was when the gift opening was winding down that everything went sideways. My mother-in-law, Denise, had been eyeing me strangely all afternoon. Denise was one of those women who had never quite accepted that her precious son had married me instead of his college girlfriend, Kelsey. She tolerated me in the way you might tolerate a persistent mosquito, with barely concealed irritation and the constant hope that I'd eventually just go away. "You know, Hannah," Denise said loudly, her voice cutting through the chatter, "I've been thinking about your situation." The room quieted. "My situation?" I asked, one hand instinctively moving to my belly. "Well, you and Jason live in that tiny apartment. Barely enough room for the 2 of you, let alone a baby. And with Jason's job situation being so," she paused dramatically, "uncertain lately." My face flushed. Jason had been between jobs for 2 months, but he'd been actively interviewing and had several promising leads. We'd been careful with money, sure, but we weren't destitute. "We're managing just fine," I said quietly, hoping to end the conversation. But Denise wasn't done. "Megan, on the other hand, has that lovely house with a dedicated nursery, and with Ryan's promotion, they're in a much better position to provide for another child right now." I felt Jason tense beside me, his hand finding mine and squeezing gently. Where was this going? My mother, who'd been bustling around cleaning up wrapping paper, suddenly stopped and looked at Denise with interest. "What are you suggesting, Pat?" she asked. "Well," Denise continued, her voice taking on a tone of false reasonableness, "I was thinking that Hannah should give Megan all her baby things. You know, the essentials she's already bought. Megan needs them more right now, and Hannah can always get new things later when she's in a better position." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I stared at Denise, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say. "Your baby supplies," Denise repeated patiently, as if speaking to a child. "The crib you bought, the car seat, the clothes, all of it. Megan could use them now, and you can get new things later when you're more financially stable." "Denise," Jason said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "that's completely inappropriate." But then my mother spoke up. "Actually, Pat might have a point. Hannah, you and Jason have been struggling lately. Megan needs these things now, and you could always get more later." I looked around the room, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak up, to point out how insane this conversation was. Instead, I saw nodding heads and murmurs of agreement. "She's right, Hannah," chimed in my Aunt Linda. "Family helps family. And Megan is about to have 3 children," added my cousin Beth. "She needs all the help she can get." I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. These people were seriously suggesting that I, at 7 months pregnant, should hand over all my baby preparations to my sister because she needed them more. "No," I said firmly, standing up from the couch. "Absolutely not." The murmurs stopped. Megan looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes that I knew were anything but. "Hannah," she said softly, "I know you're upset, but think about what's best for the babies." "What's best for the babies?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What's best for my baby is that I keep the things I bought for my baby." "Don't be selfish," Denise snapped. "Megan needs those things now. You can wait." "Wait for what?" I shot back. "For my baby to be born without anything? For us to scramble to buy everything last minute because I gave it all away?" "You're being dramatic," my mother said dismissively. "We're just talking about temporarily." "No, you're not," I interrupted. "You're talking about me giving away everything I've prepared for my child because you think Megan deserves it more." The room erupted in voices, everyone talking at once, telling me I was overreacting, being selfish, not thinking of family. But through it all, Megan sat quietly in her chair, letting everyone else fight her battle. That's when Jason stood up. "We're leaving," he said firmly. "No, we're not done here," Denise said, her voice turning cold. "Hannah is going to do the right thing." "The right thing?" I laughed bitterly. "The right thing would be for all of you to support both of your pregnant family members instead of pitting us against each other." "Don't you dare lecture us about family," Denise said, standing up and moving toward me. "You've never understood what that means." "Denise, back off," Jason warned, stepping between us. But Denise wasn't done. "You know what your problem is, Hannah? You think the world owes you something. You think because you're pregnant, everyone should cater to you. Well, newsflash, Megan is pregnant too, and she's handling it with a lot more grace than you are." That's when something inside me snapped. "Grace?" I said. "You call manipulating an entire room of people into pressuring me to give away my baby's things grace?" "I didn't manipulate anyone," Megan said, finally speaking up. "I never asked you to give me anything." "You didn't have to ask," I shot back. "You just sat there and let everyone else do your dirty work for you, just like you always do." "Hannah, that's enough," my mother said sharply. "No, it's not enough," I said, past caring about keeping my voice down. "You want to know what's not enough? The fact that not one person in this room has stood up for me. Not one person has said that maybe, just maybe, the pregnant woman should keep the things she bought for her own baby." That's when Denise made her fatal mistake. She stepped around Jason and got in my face, her finger pointed at my chest. "You ungrateful little..." The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. One moment I was standing there, and the next my cheek was stinging, and the room had gone completely silent. I stood there, hand to my cheek, staring at Denise in shock. She'd actually hit me. At 7 months pregnant, in front of my entire family, she'd slapped me. But then Megan's sister-in-law, Kelsey, the same Kelsey who Denise had wanted Jason to marry, started laughing. Actually laughing. "Don't worry, Hannah," Kelsey said between giggles. "Your baby hasn't arrived yet, and by the look of it now, I doubt it ever will." The cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. She was implying that the stress and shock might cause me to lose my baby at 7 months, that maybe I didn't deserve to be a mother at all. The room was completely quiet now, except for Kelsey's fading laughter. Everyone was staring at me, waiting to see what I would do. I could have screamed. I could have fought back. I could have slapped Denise right back and told Kelsey exactly what I thought of her in a vicious comment. Instead, I did something that apparently surprised everyone, including myself. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It wasn't even a particularly pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that should have made everyone in that room very, very nervous. "Okay," I said quietly, my voice perfectly calm. "I understand now." I turned to Megan, who was looking at me with confusion and maybe a little fear. "You want my baby things?" I asked her. "You think you need them more than I do?" She nodded hesitantly. Then you can have them, I said, all of them. The room let out a collective sigh of relief. They thought they'd won. But I continued, still smiling that cold smile. I have some conditions. Conditions? Denise asked suspiciously. Oh yes, I said. You see, if I'm going to give Megan everything I bought for my baby, then I want to make sure she really truly needs them more than I do. So, I'm going to need some proof. What kind of proof? Megan asked nervously. Financial records, I said simply. Bank statements, tax returns, pay stubs. I want to see exactly how much money you and Ryan have compared to Jason and me. Because if we're making this decision based on financial need, then we should have all the facts, don't you think? The room shifted uncomfortably. Hannah, that's private information, my mother said. Is it? I asked innocently. Because everyone here seems to know all about Jason and my financial situation. You all seem very confident that Megan needs these things more than I do, so surely you won't mind proving it. This is ridiculous, Denise huffed. Is it? I asked. Because what's ridiculous is a room full of adults pressuring a pregnant woman to give away her baby's things based on assumptions and gossip. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each person who'd been pressuring me. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice still calm but with an edge that made everyone listen. I'm going to leave now, and I'm going to take some time to think about everything that happened here today. I moved toward the door, Jason right beside me, his hand protectively on my back. And Megan, I called over my shoulder, enjoy the rest of your shower. I hope you got everything you wanted. We left them sitting there in uncomfortable silence. The drive home was quiet. Jason was furious. I could see it in the tight set of his jaw and the white-knuckled grip he had on the steering wheel. But he was also waiting for me to fall apart, to cry, to rage about what had just happened. Instead, I sat in the passenger seat, one hand on my belly, thinking, Hannah, Jason said finally, I am so sorry. I should have done more to stop that. I should have... No, I said quietly. You did exactly what you should have done. You stood by me, and you were ready to get us out of there when I needed it. But my mother hit you, he said, his voice breaking a little. She actually hit you. Yes, she did, I agreed. And now I know exactly who she really is. Jason glanced at me, probably expecting tears. Instead, he saw the same cold smile I'd worn at the shower. What are you thinking? He asked, and I could hear the concern in his voice. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that some people need to learn that actions have consequences. When we got home to our tiny apartment, which was actually a perfectly nice 2-bedroom place that we rented in a good neighborhood while we saved for a house down payment, I went straight to my computer. Jason hovered nervously as I started typing, clearly unsure what I was planning but smart enough to recognize that I was planning something. What are you doing? He asked. Research, I said simply. You see, there were things about Megan's perfect life that the family didn't know, things that I knew because Megan had confided in me during our closer moments. Back when I thought we actually had a sisterly relationship, I knew that Megan and Ryan were living paycheck to paycheck despite his promotion. The big house, mortgaged to the hilt. The expensive cars, leased. The designer clothes and constant vacations, all on credit cards that were maxed out. I knew because Megan had cried to me about it 6 months ago, worried about how they'd afford a second child. I'd listened sympathetically, and even offered to help research budgeting strategies. But apparently, Megan had decided that the solution wasn't better financial planning. It was taking my baby's things. I spent the next 3 hours on my computer, and by the time I was done, I had a complete picture of exactly how well-positioned Megan and Ryan really were. Public records are amazing things. Property records, court documents, business filings. So much information is available if you know where to look. Ryan's promotion? It came with a salary increase, sure, but it also came with a relocation requirement that they'd been fighting. The stress of potentially having to move had been part of why Megan was so desperate to make everything perfect with this pregnancy. The house they were so proud of? 3 months behind on mortgage payments, with a foreclosure notice filed just 2 weeks ago. Ryan's salary? Garnished for unpaid student loans that they'd defaulted on. The credit cards? Over $80,000 in debt across 12 different accounts. Meanwhile, Jason and I were actually doing fine. Yes, he was between jobs, but he had unemployment benefits and we had savings. We owned our cars outright, had no debt except some manageable student loans, and had been carefully saving for both the baby's arrival and the future house down payment. But the most interesting thing I found was a lawsuit. Ryan's company was being sued by a former employee for harassment and discrimination, and Ryan was named as one of the defendants. The case was scheduled to go to trial in 2 months, and if they lost, Ryan could face both termination and personal liability. None of this was public knowledge yet, but it would be soon. I sat back in my chair thinking, this information was powerful, but using it wrong would make me as bad as they were. I needed to be smart about this. That's when I remembered something Megan had told me months ago about her social media presence. She'd been building a lifestyle blog, posting about her perfect life, her perfect marriage, and her perfect family. She'd even started getting sponsorship deals with baby brands and family-oriented companies. Her whole online brand was built on the image of the perfect, financially secure young mother living the dream life. I went to her Instagram account and wasn't surprised to see that she'd already posted pictures from the baby shower, gushing about how blessed she was to have such a supportive family who always looked out for each other. There was even a picture of the pile of gifts she'd received, with a caption about how grateful she was for everyone's generosity. The comments were full of congratulations and heart emojis from her followers, many of whom were other mommy bloggers and potential sponsors. I screenshot everything, then began crafting my own post. I opened my own social media accounts, which I rarely used but which were connected to all the same family and friends who'd been at the shower, and then I began to write. Today was an interesting day. I attended my sister's baby shower, where I learned some valuable lessons about family dynamics and financial priorities. Apparently, my family believes that because I live in a smaller house and my husband is temporarily between jobs, I should give my sister all of my baby's essential items, since she needs them more. When I declined to hand over the crib, car seat, stroller, and baby clothes I'd carefully chosen and purchased for my child in 4 weeks, I was told I was being selfish. When I tried to explain that these items were necessities for my own baby, I was slapped by my mother-in-law in front of the entire family. What really struck me, though, was the assumption that financial status should determine which pregnant woman gets to keep her baby's things. So, I thought I'd do some research into this idea of financial need that everyone seems so concerned about. Interesting fact, did you know that foreclosure records are public information? I stopped there, saving the post as a draft. This was just the beginning. Over the next several days, I carefully researched and documented everything. I created a timeline of events, gathered screenshots of all the social media posts from the shower, and compiled the financial information I'd found. I also did something else. I reached out to 3 of the companies that sponsored Megan's blog. I didn't lie or exaggerate. I simply sent them screenshots of Megan's recent posts about her supportive family and blessed life, along with publicly available court documents showing the foreclosure proceedings and lawsuit. I thought you should be aware, I wrote in each email, that one of your sponsored influencers may not be representing her life situation accurately to her followers. As a consumer, I'm concerned about the authenticity of sponsored content when the influencer's actual circumstances differ significantly from what she's portraying online. 2 of the companies responded within 24 hours, thanking me for bringing it to their attention and asking for more information. The 3rd company dropped Megan's sponsorship deal immediately, but I still wasn't done. You see, I'd remembered something else. At the baby shower, several people had mentioned how successful Ryan was and how his promotion showed he was such a responsible provider. Denise had specifically bragged about Ryan's important position and how well respected he was at his company. So, I decided to do a little more research into Ryan's workplace situation. It turns out that Ryan's company had a very strict social media policy and a strong commitment to their public image. They also had a zero-tolerance policy for employees whose personal lives could negatively impact the company's reputation. I crafted a careful, factual email to Ryan's HR department, expressing my concern as a member of the community about an employee who might be facing financial difficulties that could potentially impact his judgment or reliability. I included the public records I'd found, noting that I was concerned about someone in a position of responsibility who was facing foreclosure and potential legal judgments. I made sure to mention that I wasn't trying to get anyone in trouble, but that I thought the company should be aware of the situation, especially given the pending lawsuit that named Ryan as a defendant. I sent the email on a Wednesday afternoon, timing it carefully so it would arrive during business hours when HR would be most likely to take immediate action. The response was faster than I'd anticipated. On Thursday morning, I received a professional email from the company's HR director, thanking me for bringing the matter to their attention and assuring me that they would look into it thoroughly. They also asked if I would be willing to provide any additional information, which I politely declined, stating that I'd shared everything I felt was relevant. On Friday, Ryan was called into HR for a meeting. I know this because Megan called me that evening, crying hysterically. It was the first time she'd contacted me since the baby shower, and the desperation in her voice was palpable. "Hannah, I don't know what to do," she sobbed into the phone. "Ryan's company is asking all these questions about our finances and the lawsuit. Someone told them about the foreclosure. He thinks he might lose his job." I sat in my nursing chair, feeding my son his evening bottle, and listened to my sister fall apart. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy. After all, she was still my sister, and she was pregnant and scared. But then I remembered the feel of Denise's hand across my face, Kelsey's cruel laughter, and the way Megan had sat silently while everyone pressured me to give away my baby's things. "That sounds difficult," I said neutrally. "Hannah, please," Megan begged. "I know things got heated at the shower, and I'm sorry about that. But can't you help us figure out who might have contacted Ryan's company? We need to do damage control." The irony wasn't lost on me. Megan still had no idea that I was the one behind everything that was happening. She was calling me for help, assuming I was innocent of any involvement in her troubles. "I don't know anything about Ryan's work situation," I said. Which was technically true. I knew what I'd done, but I didn't know the internal workings of his company's investigation. "But you're good at research," she pressed. "You could help us figure out who's trying to sabotage us." "Megan," I said quietly, shifting the baby to my shoulder to burp him, "maybe this isn't about sabotage. Maybe this is just consequences catching up with you." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Megan's voice came back, smaller and more uncertain. "What do you mean?" "I mean that when you live beyond your means and face legal troubles, those things don't stay hidden forever. Companies do background checks. They monitor their employees' situations. Maybe this was always going to happen." "You don't understand," Megan said, her voice rising again. "We've worked so hard to build our life. The house, the cars, everything we've accomplished. Built on debt," I interrupted gently. "Megan, everything you have is mortgaged or financed. That's not building wealth. That's building risk." "Easy for you to say," she snapped. And there was the Megan I knew. The one who lashed out when confronted with uncomfortable truths. "You and Jason don't have any ambition. You're content living in that tiny apartment, driving old cars, shopping at discount stores." I felt my calm beginning to crack. That tiny apartment is paid for. Those old cars are owned outright, and those discount stores allowed us to save money for our baby instead of going into debt to maintain an image. By the following Tuesday, Ryan was on administrative leave, pending a full investigation into both the lawsuit and his financial situation. Megan called me again that evening, but this time she wasn't crying. She was angry. "Someone is doing this to us on purpose," she said without preamble when I answered the phone. "Someone with a grudge is systematically destroying our lives." I was changing my son's diaper when she called, and I had to balance the phone against my shoulder while I worked. The normalcy of the moment, caring for my baby in the nursery I'd prepared for him, stood in stark contrast to the chaos Megan was describing. "What makes you think it's personal?" I asked. "Because it's too coordinated," Megan said. "Ryan loses his sponsorship deals, then his job gets threatened, then someone contacts his company with information that's not even readily available. Someone is targeting us." She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to confirm her suspicions. "Maybe you should focus on dealing with the problems instead of trying to figure out who's pointing them out," I suggested. "That's not helpful, Hannah," Megan snapped. "I need support right now, not lectures. Like the support you gave me at your baby shower?" The words were out before I could stop them. The line went quiet for a long moment. "That was different," Megan said finally. "How?" I asked. "You were being stubborn. We were trying to help both of us by pooling resources where they were needed most." I finished diapering the baby and picked him up, holding him close. His warmth and weight against my chest reminded me why I'd fought so hard to keep the things I'd bought for him. "Megan," I said carefully, Do you really believe that? Do you honestly think that pressuring me to give away my baby's crib and car seat was about helping both of us? Mom said you could get new things later, when Jason found work, Megan said, but her voice lacked conviction. And what if Jason didn't find work quickly? What if my baby had been born before I could replace everything? What then? Megan was quiet again. You know what I think? I continued. I think you were scared about your own situation, and instead of dealing with it honestly, you decided it would be easier to take my preparations and make them your problem to solve later. That's not. And when I wouldn't go along with it, your whole family turned on me. Your mother-in-law slapped me. She slapped a pregnant woman because I wouldn't give away my baby's things. Denise was upset, Megan said weakly. Denise was wrong. And so were you for letting it happen. There was a long pause before Megan spoke again. And when she did, her voice was small and tired. I don't know what to do, Hannah. We're going to lose the house. Ryan might lose his job. I'm scared. For the first time since the baby shower, I heard genuine vulnerability in my sister's voice instead of manipulation or self-pity. But I also remembered that she'd had multiple opportunities over the past weeks to reach out and apologize, and she'd chosen not to until she needed something from me. Then maybe it's time to make some changes, I said. Real changes, not just shifting your problems to other people. What kind of changes? She asked. The kind that involves living within your means, getting rid of the house you can't afford, selling the cars you don't own, stopping the lifestyle blogging that's built on lies about your financial situation. You know about the blog? Megan asked, and I could hear the fear in her voice. Megan, everyone knows about the blog. You've been posting about your perfect life while your world falls apart behind the scenes. What did you think would happen when people found out the truth? I was trying to build something, she said defensively. The sponsorships were helping with our income. Built on lies, I said firmly. You were taking money from companies to promote a lifestyle you couldn't afford, using their products to create an image that wasn't real. That's fraud, Megan. The word hung between us like a physical thing. I never thought of it that way, she whispered. Maybe you should have. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet nursery, rocking my son and thinking about the conversation. Megan was finally starting to understand the gravity of her situation, but I wondered if it was too late for her to make the changes she needed to make. But the real masterpiece was still to come. I waited exactly 6 weeks after the baby shower, then posted my full story on social media. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. Everyone who had been at the shower knew exactly who I was talking about. 6 weeks ago, I was 7 months pregnant and attending what I thought would be a joyful family celebration. Instead, I was pressured by multiple family members to give away all of my baby's essential items to another family member, who supposedly needed them more due to my inferior financial situation. When I refused to hand over my baby's crib, car seat, clothes, and other necessities, I was told I was being selfish and putting my own needs above family. When I continued to refuse, I was physically assaulted by a family member who slapped me in front of everyone. The most hurtful part wasn't the slap or the pressure to give away my baby's things, it was the laughter that followed, when someone said they doubted my baby would ever arrive given the circumstances. But here's what really interests me about this situation. The assumption that financial need should determine which pregnant woman gets to keep her baby's essentials. Because if we're going to make that the criteria, shouldn't we be working with accurate information? Public records show that the family member who needed my baby things more than I did is actually 3 months behind on their mortgage, with active foreclosure proceedings, over $80,000 in credit card debt, facing wage garnishment for defaulted student loans, named as a defendant in a workplace harassment lawsuit, living in a house they can't afford with cars they don't own. Meanwhile, my husband and I rent a nice apartment while saving for a house, own our cars outright, have minimal debt and good credit, have savings specifically set aside for our baby's arrival, have stable insurance and health care. So, I have to wonder, when people assumed I needed these baby items less, what exactly were they basing that assumption on? The size of our apartment? The fact that my husband was temporarily between jobs? Or was it just easier to pressure the person they thought would be less likely to fight back? I share this not to shame anyone, but because I think it's important to examine our assumptions about family, need, and support. Sometimes the people who look like they have everything together are the ones who are struggling most. And sometimes, the people we assume are struggling are actually doing just fine. To the family member who slapped me, assault is never acceptable, regardless of the circumstances or your feelings about the situation. To the family member who said my baby might not ever arrive, my son was born healthy and beautiful 2 weeks ago, no thanks to your well wishes. And to everyone who pressured me to give away my baby's things, he's sleeping peacefully in the crib I bought for him, wearing the clothes I chose for him, and riding to his first pediatrician appointment in the car seat I selected for his safety. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and letting the truth speak for itself. I posted it at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, right when social media engagement was typically highest. Within an hour it had 50 comments and 20 shares. Within 3 hours it had been shared over 200 times and had comments from people all over the country sharing their own stories of family manipulation and financial pressure. By evening it had gone viral within our community. My phone started ringing almost immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. I had a newborn to care for, and I'd said everything I needed to say. The fallout was swift and thorough. Meghan's remaining sponsorship deals were dropped within 48 hours, as the companies realized their perfect lifestyle influencer was actually facing foreclosure and bankruptcy. Ryan was terminated from his job 3 days later, officially for bringing negative attention to the company, but really because they couldn't risk keeping someone who was facing both financial and legal troubles. The foreclosure proceedings accelerated once Ryan lost his job, and Meghan and Ryan had to move in with his parents within a month. Denise called me exactly once, screaming about how I'd ruined everything and demanding I take down the post. I listened quietly until she was done, then said, "You should have thought about consequences before you slapped a pregnant woman," and hung up. My mother tried a different approach, crying about how I was tearing the family apart, and how Meghan was devastated by everything that had happened. The family tore itself apart the moment you all decided that one pregnant woman mattered less than the other, I told her. I just made sure everyone could see what actually happened. Meghan herself never called, but she did delete all her social media accounts and shut down her blog. The most satisfying moment came 8 weeks later, when I received a text from my cousin Beth, who had been one of the people pressuring me at the shower. "I saw your post," she wrote. "I had no idea about Meghan's situation. I'm sorry we put you in that position. It wasn't right. It was the only apology I received, but it was enough. Jason was initially worried about my methods. Don't you think this was a little ruthless?" he asked one evening as we were feeding our son his bottle. I looked down at our perfect healthy baby boy, the baby that Kelsey had suggested might never arrive, and felt nothing but peace about my choices. "They slapped a pregnant woman and told her she didn't deserve to keep the things she bought for her baby," I said quietly. "They laughed at the idea that my child might not survive. They tried to manipulate and pressure me into giving away my son's essential items because they decided someone else, with 2 kids already, deserved them more." I shifted the baby to my shoulder, patting his back gently. I didn't lie about anything. I didn't exaggerate anything. I just made sure that the same standards they wanted to apply to me got applied equally to everyone. If financial situation is going to determine who gets what, then everyone's financial situation should be on the table. Jason was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. They made their choices, and choices have consequences. The truth is, I don't regret anything I did. Not the research, not the posts, not the emails to the companies and Ryan's employer. They created a situation where they tried to use power and pressure to take things from me that I needed for my child. They physically assaulted me when I wouldn't comply. They mocked the idea that my baby might survive. All I did was make sure that the truth came to light. Meghan and Ryan eventually got back on their feet. They had to move to a smaller place and drastically reduce their lifestyle, but they managed to avoid bankruptcy. Ryan found a new job, though at a significant pay cut. Meghan had to get a part-time job to help make ends meet. Their 3rd child was born healthy and beautiful, and I genuinely hope they've learned to live within their means. Denise and I have never spoken again, which suits me fine. Jason maintains a polite but distant relationship with her, mainly for the sake of his father, who wasn't involved in any of the drama. My parents took longer to come around, but eventually they realized that they'd been wrong to pressure me the way they did. We have a cordial relationship now, though it will never be the same as it was before. The extended family mostly stayed out of it, though a few people quietly reached out to apologize for their part in what happened at the shower. As for me, I'm doing exactly what I said I would do in my post, living well and letting the truth speak for itself. My son is now 4 months old, sleeping soundly in the crib I bought for him, playing with toys I selected and wearing clothes I chose with love and anticipation during my pregnancy. He's never known a day without everything he needed, because his mother refused to be pressured into giving those things away. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about how everything turned out for Megan and Ryan. The answer is no. They made their choices when they decided to pressure a pregnant woman to give away her baby's essentials. They made their choices when they supported someone slapping me. They made their choices when they laughed at the suggestion that my baby might not survive. I simply made sure those choices had appropriate consequences. The best revenge isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, and thorough. Sometimes it's simply making sure that people who thought they could manipulate and control you learn that their actions have consequences. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is smile, quietly walk away, and let the truth do the work for you. My family thought they could pressure me into giving up what I'd prepared for my child because they assumed I was too weak, too broke, or too desperate to fight back. They were wrong on all counts, and now they know it.